I think it's safe to say that nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, man, I can't wait to see what Anduin is up today. Because Anduin is probably the most boring good guy Warcraft has ever created. And I don't mean that in a he's a bad character kind of way. He's just too perfect, and that's kind of the problem. When I first played through the Alliance story, I wanted to like Anduin. He's got the setup for an amazing arc. A young king thrust into power after his father's death, trying to live up to an impossible legacy. That's gold. That's Shakespearean tragedy material. You've got the makings of a conflict ruler wrestling with morality, politics, and the shadow of a father who was basically Warcraft's version of Leonidas. But instead we got a priest with a sword. Anduin doesn't feel like a king. He feels like a well-meaning guidance counselor who got promoted by accident. The kind of guy who'd declare war on you, but include a handwritten apology note and a bag of muffins. Now, to be fair, Anduin isn't a bad person. He's probably one of the kindest, most genuinely good-hearted characters in Warcraft. The issue is that kindness is all he is. That's his whole personality. He doesn't make hard decisions, he doesn't get morally tested, and he just forgives everyone until the plot moves on. It's like the writers took lawful good and turned the dial so hard it snapped off. He's like if TED Talk energy was a raid leader. And every time the story almost gives him a chance to be interesting, it gets taken away. Remember BFA? You've got one of the most brutal, morally grey conflicts in Warcraft's history. Cities burning, leaders dying, the Horde and Alliance at each other's throats, and Anduin's response is basically, maybe if we'll all just talk it out, it will be fine. Yeah, good luck with that, my guy. I'm sure the undead war machine will totally chill if you just say please. Now I get it, peace is noble. Diplomacy is hard, but Warcraft isn't a tea party. It's a world built on conflict. That's literally in the name. Peace is interesting when it costs something, when it requires sacrifice, compromise, and pain. But Anduin's version of peace never costs him anything. Never. He gets to stay pure every time, while everyone else does the dirty work for him. Every other leader in Warcraft had to bleed for their ideals. Thrall lost everything to give the Horde a new home. Jaina's peace nearly destroyed her sanity. Even Varian, Anduin's father, had to walk through fire to become the man he was. And that's literally where the cracks in Anduin's character start to show, when you compare him to Varian. Varian wasn't born a king. He earned it through pain. He was a gladiator, a prisoner, a man torn in two, literally. He fought his way back from exile and forged his identity with his bare hands. When Varian said, "For the Alliance," you felt it. Where Varian was forged in battle, Anduin was shaped by sermons. Where Varian led through action, Anduin leads through ideals. Varian fought for peace because he understood war. Anduin preaches peace because he's afraid of war. And that's a huge difference. Varian was flawed, angry and emotional but real. Anduin is calm, polite and endlessly forgiving, and that makes him hollow. It's like Blizzard wanted to make a character who embodied hope but forgot that hope only matters when it's tested. One had conviction, the other had faith, and faith alone doesn't win wars or loyalty. Varian had the presence that could unite armies. Anduin has that kind of presence that could make you feel bad for not recycling. And yet, for all his softness, the game treats Anduin like he's the second coming of the light. Every cinematic frames him like he's the chosen one, the moral compass of the Alliance. Meanwhile, he's surrounded by leaders with actual trauma, power, and history. Tyrannus' rage, Gen's loss, Jaina's regret, and all of them get sidelined so Anduin can monologue about his feelings. It's exhausting, and it's not that compassion doesn't have a place in Warcraft. It absolutely does. The problem is that compassion without consequence is boring. Anduin never earns his wisdom. He's just right by default. He never fails in a way that changes him. Every loss he experiences just makes him sad for a while until someone tells him, "You're doing your best, your majesty," and boom, lesson learned. And in Shadowlands, the one time Blizzard had a real chance to give Anduin depth, this was it, the golden opportunity. Anduin gets mind controlled by the jailer, forced to commit atrocities, turned into a puppet of darkness. It's the ultimate test of faith, the kind of trauma that could finally shatter his perfect image and force him to rebuild from the ashes. And for a moment it works. When you see the faint spark of resistance in his eyes, when you realize he's aware but powerless, that's chilling. That's a great setup for a redemption arc. But then the story just stops caring. Instead of exploring a philosophical tour, the guilt, the fear, the loss of self, we get mopey, grayscale Anduin whispering about wanting to be free. It's like they replace his dialogue with Tumblr quotes about healing.
You know the light is not with me.
They had the chance to turn Anduin into something complex, something broken, something human, but instead he just gets therapy off screen. He doesn't confront what he did. He doesn't change his worldview. He doesn't wrestle with his faith. He just looks sad for a few cutscenes and then says, I think I'll go find myself. Find yourself where, Anduin? It's in a monastery? In a field of metaphorical forgiveness? It's poetic, sure, but also kind of empty. Because when it's all over, Anduin doesn't grow. He doesn't evolve. He just resets. He walks away from a throne like he's clocking out early on a Friday. Yeah, ruling a kingdom's not really for me anymore, guys. I'll let Turalyon handle it. Cool. And that's the heart of it. Anduin never rules. He just reacts. Things happen to him not because of him. He's a protagonist without agency, a king who's always at the mercy of bigger forces. The Legion, the Horde, the Jailer, everyone pushes him around while he stands there being sad about it. Compare that to Arthas, who made his own choices, tragic as they were. Arthas's fall had weight because he actively stepped up onto the dark path, believing he was doing the right thing. Anduin, he just floats wherever the light or the plot tells him to go. Even Garrosh, he chooses his every mistake. He's proud of it. He dies screaming in defiance, saying, I will never be a slave. Anduin, he just cries in grayscale and then wanders off to write in his journal. The difference is agency. Garrosh failed because of his pride. Anduin fails because he never really acts. He's not a ruler, he's just a symbol, a walking sermon about forgiveness that never learns what forgiveness actually costs. When you think about what makes Warcraft's best characters stick, Arthas, Thrall, Illidan, is that they change, they make mistakes, they evolve, and they're messy. Anduin never gets messy. He's too polished and good, too afraid to break, and that makes him forgettable. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a good story buried somewhere inside Anduin. The idea of a boy raised in peace who has to lead in war, haunted by the example of a father who can never live up to. That's powerful stuff. Imagine if the story had actually leaned into that. Anduin trying to honor Varian's legacy but slowly realizing he's not his father. That the ideals of peace don't work in a world built on violence. Imagine him making compromises, betraying his own morals, and then having to live with that guilt. But instead, Blizzard seemed scared to let him fail. He's treated like a franchise moral mascot, too pure to break, and too important to risk alienating. So he stagnates. Every expansion resets him back to noble leader, trying to do the right thing. And that's it. Anduin's problem isn't that he's evil or misguided, it's that he never changes. He starts as the hopeful prince, becomes the hopeful king, and ends up as the hopeful wanderer. That's not development, that's emotional copy-pasting. You never talk about him the way you talk about Arthas or Thrall. Those characters had passion and conviction, they meant something. Anduin just exists. He's just the guy you invite to the party because you feel bad leaving him out. Maybe one day Blizzard will give Anduin a real story. One where he has to make an impossible choice and live up with the consequences. Because right now he's not a king. He's a mascot of the idea of trying your best. And in a world full of undead kings, rage-fueled orcs, and demon hunters with trust issues, that just doesn't cut it anymore. Anduin Wrynn is the king who never learned to rule. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.